We're going to go over the introduction to ethics and research and development. I briefly mentioned this last class. We should spend more time on it because there's a good chance some of you are going to come back for a master's degree or PhD, and in that instance, you will be doing research and development. Additionally, some of you will just go directly into R&D wherever you go. So this is a thing that you want to pay attention to because it does matter long term. So normally I'd have everybody stand up. Today I'm just going to read it to you. Engineers in the fulfillment of their professional duties shall hold paramount the safety, health, and welfare of the public. Perform services only in areas of their competence. Issue public statements only in an objective and truthful manner. Act for each employer or client as faithful agents or trustees. Avoid deceptive acts. Conduct themselves honorably, responsibly, ethically, and lawfully so as to enhance the honor, reputation, and usefulness of the profession. All right, so research and development, also referred to as R&D, is required to advance the sciences. Whenever you're doing testing or anything like that, you are doing research. Whenever you make a new product, you're developing a new product. So you're just trying to advance the science and you're trying to advance technology in some way, shape, or form. That work doesn't happen in a vacuum. It's always driven by something. Somebody is paying you to do that work for some reason. However, if the research is done in a particularly unethical way, it tends to have a negative impact on society. So you have to have respect for everybody involved. That's the people who are paying for the project, the people who are being tested if the project involves testing of people, the people who end up using the end product. You have to keep them in mind whenever you're doing anything. So you're expected to be honest and have integrity. We went over this in the last class. People need to trust you. They need to know that your results are genuine. And you have to go out of your way to be objective in your statements. That means no weasel wording, no omitting important details. The way you structure your tests needs to be ethical and reasonable. You have to respect human rights. If you are testing on people, they need to consent to the testing. They need to understand what they're being tested on and what the possibilities of outcomes might be in case they don't want to have those nasty side effects. You do have to make an attempt to assess risk and safety. I'll go into examples this class and next of what I mean by that because sometimes this is accidental, but just doing some level of risk assessment would have mitigated a lot of problems. You do have to make sure that you don't accidentally destroy the environment. There have been plenty of instances where people thought they were drilling in a safe spot and they ended up causing a massive oil spill. You have to make sure that what you're doing isn't going to be terrible for the environment. You actually have to put measures in to make sure you don't accidentally cause a problem. You have to be transparent. I strongly recommend just getting used to being transparent and honest and open about your dialogue. Make it clear what you plan on doing with people. You don't want surprises, even in R&D when you're trying to figure out something new. You really don't want surprises. And so you have to if you do your research well, you'll have 99% of the correct answers before you run the test. And the test just shows you what that last 1% will be. All right. Now, these are ethical problems you as engineers in R&D are going to run into. Conflict of interest. Sometimes the people paying you to do a test want a particular answer. You have to hold your ground on this one. Tell them the truth. If the answer they wanted isn't the answer they get, tough. Yes, you are allowed to explain to them how they could have gotten the answer and how they're allowed to change their design to get that answer. But if the product they give you is just not up to snuff, you have to tell them, and you have to make it clear why. There's data manipulation. This is another one. This also goes with weasel wording. If you omit data or you exaggerate data and you try to structure the data to confuse people, once you get caught, you're going to lose all trust that you had. And believe me, you will eventually be caught. And then there's the intellectual property rights. I can't stress this one enough. People in all areas, whether it be R&D or manufacturing, if you violate IP, intellectual property, that means a copyright, a patent, a trademark, you're going to get in trouble. In addition to that, if you have one of those things and somebody starts using it, you're not going to appreciate it. So make sure that if you use somebody else's work, you cite it correctly. If you're going to use somebody else's patent, make sure you have their permission. Yeah, you'll probably have to pay them. Tough. Deal with it. That's the way the world works. Now, when you have a conflict of interest, these are the issues that are going to arise. It compromises your work. So in this case, if you were doing research and there's a particular answer people want, if you give them that answer and the data doesn't support it, it's going to look really bad. Moving forward, a lot of people aren't going to want to work with you. And in some instances, you'll be forbidden from doing the work. It generates biased results, which again, you're an engineer, you're not supposed to have a bias, you're supposed to be objective. So when you are doing a research project, when you're doing a task of any kind, be it research or just contract review, you need to state your conflict of interest, state your bias. It's human to have a bias. Just tell people what it is ahead of time. 9 times out of 10, if you have this issue, the people you work for will either say, all right, Jimmy's got a bias, so we're just going to take what he has to say with a grain of salt, or they'll actually have a protocol to follow to deal with your bias. It's not really that big of an issue to have a bias. Just state it and be upfront about it and honest. So these are common conflicts of interest. So the biggest one is awarding yourself a contract. This can send you to jail. Don't do it. If you review your own work, so say you work for one company, you built a bridge, the bridge falls down, and then as a contractor you review why that bridge fell down, that's a conflict of interest. Your answer might hide the fact that you messed up, so you're not allowed to do that. Or just awarding a contract to your former employer. It's unlikely that you stop being friends with the people you worked with. So it's frowned upon to award them contracts. You should award people contracts based off of their skill set, not their relationship with you. All right. Data manipulation. These are the reasons you shouldn't do data manipulation. Again, violates trust. Once people realize that's a thing you like to do, they're going to stop giving you information. Then they're going to stop taking information from you. It leads to false conclusions. A lot of times in engineering, it's important to be right. The general public will stop trusting engineers and scientists if you do data manipulation. It'll harm your reputation. Again, if you do data manipulation, depending on what industry you're in, you might be forbidden from working in that industry ever again. It undermines future research, not just for you, but for your organization and people who work in your field. A lot of doctors have a lot of problems right now associated with vaccines because some guy 20 years ago lied about vaccines and vaccine research. And now it's a huge hurdle for them. Make sure that you're not part of one of these problems. These are the types of data manipulation. There's data fabrication. So this is just lying. saying you ran a test when you didn't. This is running a test but changing the results that you document. This is omitting reports, omitting information that should be shared. Plagiarism. And saying you did something when really somebody else did something. And lastly, saying somebody else did something when really you did it. Intellectual property rights. If you ever get a patent or a copyright or a trademark, that's going to be important to you. I have a patent. I'll be pissed if somebody uses it without my permission. If you get a patent, you're going to feel the same way. So when it comes to patents, because we're engineers, yeah, maybe we'll get a trademark or copyright, but really it's patents we're talking about. You're not going to want somebody to use it without your permission. You're going to want at least some level of respect and appreciation for the level of effort you put into it. So you need to go out of your way to give them respect about their work. Additionally, it harms innovation. This one bugs me because even from an economic standpoint, you really should be following the IP and respecting it. If you have no benefit to patenting something, inventing something new, you're not going to do it, right? So it inhibits your motivation to want to invent new things. And as engineers, that's really a thing you should want to do. Now, there are legal consequences, and unfortunately, there are patent trolls, and that's aggravating. And all I can say is they're unethical. But in the instances where it's not a patent troll, and you violate a patent, the hammer that comes down with that is very unpleasant. So go out of your way not to have to worry about this. And lastly, it damages your professional reputation. Now, in this instance, no, you probably won't go to jail. You probably won't be kicked out of the industry, but it will set you back professionally. Now we're going to go over some cases. So I'm gonna intentionally go slow with these because this is a recording. So we're going to talk about the experimental setup. This test. It was advertised as being negatively reinforced improved memory. So the experimental setup was there were volunteers. There were two groups. There were learners and teachers. The learners were shown index cards and asked to recite what they saw. The learners were also attached to an electroshock machine. Teachers would show the index card and test the learner in what they saw. The teacher would increase the shock by 10% for every wrong answer. So I'm about to present the results as roughly how they came out. One half walked out during the testing. That is to say, the learners said, forget this, took off the electroshocks, and left. 1/3 passed out due to pain from the shocks. Oh, sorry, I said 1/2. I said 1/3, but I meant 1/2 walked out. And then 1/6 became non-responsive and needed to be taken to the hospital. So I'm going to give you a minute. You should pause to think about this. But is there anything unethical about this experiment that you can think of? All right, so now would be a good time to pause and think about it. I'm going to count to 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so the first one is there's a safety risk here. You're shocking people. They're clearly passing out of pain. You don't pass out because you're healthy. You pass out because your body thinks you're in danger. The teachers believed they were causing physical harm to the learners by administering electroshocks. This belief could cause significant emotional distress and moral conflict for the teachers as well. In ethical research, it's generally considered unacceptable to cause harm to participants, whether physical or psychological. The next is there's lack of informed consent. Now, without explaining too much of what actually happened, neither the learners or the teachers understood the severity of what was going on with the shocks. The teachers were not fully informed about the true nature of the experiment. They were led to believe that the purpose of the experiment was to study the effects of punishment on learning, not obedience to authority. So in this case, the teachers were just increasing the shocks because there was a PhD behind them telling them they had to. In ethical research, all participants must be fully informed about the purpose of the study, what will be involved, and any potential risks or benefits before they agree to participate. All right, the next part of this is there's deception. So I didn't explain this part fully, but the teachers were deceived about several aspects of the experiment, including the fact that the learners were actors and they were not actually being electrically shocked. They were performing. While this deception can sometimes be justified in research if it is necessary to achieve the study's goal, and if no other method can be used, it is generally considered unethical because it undermines trust and respect for the autonomy of the participants. And then there was a lack of debriefing. So a lot of these teachers walked out thinking they might have killed somebody. Initially, the teachers were not debriefed immediately after the experiment. Debriefing is an important ethical requirement in research, especially when deception has been used. It involves explaining to participants the true purpose of the study, why the deception was necessary, and how the results will be used. It also provides an opportunity to address any distress or concerns caused by the experiment. This is Milgram's experiment. The lack of immediate debriefing could have left participants with ongoing distress or guilt. That is to say, they might have thought they killed somebody. Experiment. All right, the experimental setup. Volunteers were divided into two roles, teachers and learners, though the learners were actually actors. Teachers were instructed to teach the learners pairs of words. Learners were attached to the electroshock machine, in reality a fake machine. Teachers would test the learners on their memory of the words pairs. For every wrong answer, the teachers were instructed to administer a shock, increasing the voltage with each wrong answer. The results, as perceived by the teachers, many teachers showed signs of extreme distress and discomfort. They didn't enjoy hurting people, and you shouldn't. Despite this, a significant number of teachers continued to administer shocks as instructed by the authority figure. This is the experimenter, the PhD that was standing behind them. The experiment demonstrated the powerful influence of obedience to authority, a situation in which people may act against their personal moral beliefs. A lot of people have trouble with this experiment, not because of the ethical things that are wrong with it. There are ethical, what Milgram did to find these results can be considered very unethical, but he also showed if your supervisor tells you to do something heinous, something that you honestly believe you'll never do, like kill somebody, if this person of authority comes to you and says, you have to do this, there's a really good chance you will. Wakefield experiment. This one is the one I just referenced about vaccines, the one that causes a lot of headaches for a lot of people. Wakefield is paid or was paid by a law firm to find a problem with the MMR vaccine. 12 children aged between 3 and 10 participated in the study. All children had a history of normal development followed by a loss of acquired skills, including language, together with diarrhea and abdominal pain. Parents of 8 out of the 12 children linked the onset of behavioral symptoms to the MMR vaccine. The children were admitted to the hospital for a series of diagnostic tests over a period of 5 to 10 days. The study was approved by the Ethical Practices Committee of the Royal Free Hospital NHS Trust, and parents gave informed consent. So this happened in the UK. Just looking at this setup, can you see anything that might be considered unethical? I'll let you pause and think about it before I answer it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the children underwent a series of invasive procedures as part of the study, including a lumbar puncture and colonoscopy. Blood samples were taken from the children for immunological studies. The children's parents were asked to provide a detailed personal and family psychiatric history. The children's developmental regression was linked temporarily to the MMR vaccine by the parents or the child's physician. The study proposed a new syndrome of enterocolitis and regressive autism triggered by the MMR vaccine. Again, from this procedure, do you see anything wrong? I'll give you 5 minutes, 5 seconds to pause it and think about it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The study proposed a new syndrome of enterocolitis and regressive autism triggered by the MMR vaccine. The study reported that 8 out of the 12 children, 2/3, showed behavioral symptoms shortly after the MMR vaccine. It was reported that all 12 children had intestinal abnormalities ranging from lymphoid nodular hyperplasia to aphthoid ulcerations. The study claimed that 9 out of the 12 children, 3/4, had a form of autism that was a new variant and associated with gastrointestinal symptoms. The study suggests a possible link between the MMR vaccine, a new form of autism, and the gastrointestinal disease. All right. So the ethics associated with this. So there was inadequate and biased sampling size. The study included only 12 children, which is a very small sample size. To get a population sample size, you need at least 25 to 30 participants. But it's strongly recommended to get as many as possible. If you can get 10,000, get 10,000. This makes it difficult to draw any statistical significant conclusions. That is to say, with this sample size so small, there's a really high chance that there was just a fluke. Moreover, the selection of the participants was not random. You need to have random sampling. If you go out of your way to find kids whose parents are autistic, the chances that the children themselves are also autistic is very high, which is what Wakefield did. There was lack of proper consent. The study involved invasive procedures. The colonoscopy and lumbar puncture didn't add any value to the test. And Wakefield knew that. He was doing it as a scare tactic on the parents. Further, that testing wasn't approved by the ethics department that he was working with. Lastly, the parents didn't know Wakefield was being paid to find a specific result. There was a conflict of interest. Wakefield was paid to find results. That's not how R&D is supposed to be done. He went out of his way to cherry pick the right kids to get him the results he wanted. This is not what you're supposed to do, and the only reason he did that was because he was being paid to do that. He falsified the data. This report explicitly stated autism was post or after the fact of getting the MMR vaccine. However, it was later revealed that the children all had autism beforehand. So this suggests that Wakefield, instead of looking for parents who had autism, found kids that had autism and then tested them. There was unjustified public alarm. Wakefield not only was being paid by a law firm, but he also owned a patent on a type of vaccine that was competing with the MMR vaccine. In his report, he said instead of taking the MMR vaccine, they should be taking his. Now, he didn't explicitly state that it was his, but he did say that they should stop taking the MMR vaccine. This caused widespread fear and confusion among parents, leading to a significant drop in vaccination rates. This led to an outbreak of measles. Lastly, there's a breach of trust. As a doctor, Wakefield had a duty of care towards his patients. By conducting unnecessary and invasive procedures without proper ethical approval, and by falsifying the data, he breached this trust. All right. The next test is effects of power in the experimental setup. 24 male students were selected at random, assigned to play roles of either a prisoner or a guard. The prison was a mock setup created in the basement of a Stanford psychology building. The guards were given uniforms, batons, and mirrored sunglasses to prevent eye contact. The prisoners were arrested at their homes, charged with armed robbery, and sentenced to prison. So I'm sure some people watching this have already put this 2 and 2 together, but being that it was done at Stanford and it's about a prison, this is the Stanford prison experiment. So, just looking at this slide, can you see anything ethically wrong with this setup? So, if it's not obvious, getting arrested is very unpleasant. The 12 students that were prisoners that got arrested were not told that they would be arrested. And so this caused a lot of emotional distress on their end, and they were not prepared for it when they got arrested. All right. Now, once the prisoners were in their jail cells, they were subject to a dehumanizing process to mimic the process of entering a real prison. They were stripped, deloused, and given prison uniforms and ID numbers. The guards were given complete control over the prisoners, with minimal interference from the researchers. Again, do you see anything ethically uncouth, something you shouldn't be doing here? I'm going to count to 5. You can pause it and think about it if you would like. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there's a respect for persons issue here. They're dehumanizing the prisoner. Now, in reality, some people might say this is okay, but you really shouldn't be dehumanizing anybody, even if they are a dehumanizer themselves. That is to say, if they're a murderer. Additionally, the guards enjoyed taking away the dignity and autonomy of the participants. This is a violation of the principle of respect for a person, which requires that individuals be treated as autonomous agents. The findings. The experiment was supposed to last for 2 weeks, but was terminated after just 6 days due to the disturbing behavior observed. The guards began to display sadistic tendencies, and the prisoners showed signs of extreme stress and anxiety. Some prisoners were released early due to severe emotional distress. All right. So again, I'm going to count to 5 in that time frame. You can pause it and think about it if you would like. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So in this case, there's beneficence and non-malfeasance. The experiment caused severe emotional distress to the participants, which could have been anticipated but was not adequately prevented. This is a violation of the principle of beneficence, which means doing good, and non-malfeasance, which means avoiding harm. Aftermath. The experiment was widely criticized for its ethical implications. The lead psychologists themselves played the role of superintendent, blurring the lines between researcher and participant. The experiment raised serious questions about the ethics of role-playing experiments. All right. Again, I'm going to count to 5. I want you to think about it. Pause it if you need to. I'm going to go over what the ethical issues here are. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the objectivity integrity is an issue here. You got to remember, you need to be objective when you're doing research. You're not looking for an answer. You're just trying to find the results. Zimbardo, the lead researcher, became too involved in the experiment, taking on the role of superintendent. You're supposed to be separated from the research, and in this case, he was part of the research. This compromises objectivity and integrity in the research. All right, so before I get involved in this, one interesting tidbit about Zimbardo and the Stanford prison experiment was the reason it got stopped early was because one of the prisoners went to his girlfriend and told her what was going on, and Zimbardo himself wanted to keep going, but his girlfriend actually went to the police and said what he's doing is illegal and you need to make him stop. Which adds another layer of ethics, being that Zimbardo didn't realize what he was doing was wrong because he was so engrossed in the role-playing. All right, so now we're going to talk about the Demon Core. If anybody was paying attention to the Therac 25 video, you're going to see some things that look familiar. So the Demon Core was manufactured during World War II as a fissile core for an early atomic bomb. It was involved in 2 fatal accidents at Los Alamos Laboratories. It was a solid 6.2 kilogram sphere measuring 89 millimeters in diameter. It consisted of 3 parts: a plutonium-gallium hemisphere, another plutonium-gallium hemisphere, and a ring. The ring was designed to keep the neutron flux from jetting, and it also allowed the rings to be joined together. All right, so the first incident. So keep in mind that a lot of what was going on here was before they really understood the risks associated with radiation. So physicist Harry Daghlian made a mistake with performing a neutron reflector experiment on the core. He accidentally dropped a brick onto the core, causing the core to go well into supercritical, a self-sustaining critical chain reaction. Daghlian died 25 days later from acute radiation poisoning. So this man was 25 years old. This is the first incident, and it highlights the ethical issue of safety protocols and risk management. So yeah, there's some level of they didn't know any better, give them a break here, but when you look at the experimental setup, it was very sloppy. Even if it wasn't radiation, the way he set up the experiment, he shouldn't have been doing it that way. The experiment was also conducted by a single person, which increased the risk of accidents. There should have been a group of people there, watching him, helping him. This is really what led to the fatality. So the second incident. This happened this happened enough time later that they should have known better. So Louis Slotin, this gentleman, and 7 other personnel were conducting an experiment to verify the closeness of the core to criticality by the positioning of the neutron reflector. Slotin's screwdriver slipped, allowing the reflector to fall into place around the core. The core became supercritical, releasing an intense burst of neutron radiation. Slotin died 9 days later from acute radiation poisoning. So, the thing here is, they knew better. Somebody had already died from this exact core. And they knew how dangerous it was. However, instead of making it safe, they just kind of said, oh, whoops, whatever. The experiment was conducted manually, which increased the risk of human error. The use of standard flat-tip screwdrivers to manipulate a highly sensitive and dangerous material shows a disregard for safety procedures. All right, so the aftermath. What do? So after the incident, hands-on critical experiments were stopped, and they switched to remote control machines and TV cameras. And there was a huge distance between you and the machines, that way you didn't hurt yourself. However, ultimately, they decided to blow up the core. Now, again, you really should be taking a proactive approach when it comes to safety, not a reactive approach to safety. That is, you should try to avoid safety incidents before they happen. Not only that, but if you do try to avoid them ahead of time, and heaven forbid they do happen, people's reaction to it won't be, oh my God, you're so sloppy. It's going to be, oh my God, how could we have predicted that? And there will be more forgiveness towards you. All right, now we're going to talk about DDT. DDT is an organochlorine insecticide and was first synthesized in 1874. It was widely used for insect control due to its effectiveness, low manufacturing cost, and persistence in the environment. DDT was used by the military in World War II to control malaria, typhus, body lice, and bubonic plague. It was also used on a variety of food crops and in buildings for pest control. Now, one thing I do want to point out about DDT is it made the cost of food drop by a lot. Before its introduction into commercial use, farmers would have to actually allot a certain percentage of their crops to the bugs, to disease. With the introduction of DDT, they effectively no longer had to worry about bugs and disease. And so they could grow twice as much food at next to no extra cost. However, there is an issue with DDT. It doesn't go away. It has a half-life of 2 to 15 years. That means if you dump a kilogram of this stuff into the soil, there's a good chance there will still be half a kilogram in the soil after 15 years. And after 30 years, there'll still be a quarter of a kilogram in there. Not only that, it has a tendency to accumulate in fatty tissue. This includes insects, wildlife, and humans. DDT is metabolized into various breakdown products in the body, including DDD, DDE, and DDA. The fat stores are used during periods of starvation. The breakdown products of DDT are released into the blood, where they may be toxic to the liver and the nervous system. Now, some of this might not sound like that big a deal to you. You gotta remember, even though right now you want to do the opposite of this, but if you ever have kids, there's a really good chance that they're going to be breastfed. And that requires the fatty tissue to get broken down during that process. And so you'd be feeding your child DDE, DDD, or DDA, and that can get them sick. So the impact on wildlife. DDT is slightly to moderately toxic to birds when eaten. One of its breakdown products, DDE, causes eggshell thinning and embryo deaths in birds. It's also highly aquatic to animals and fish, affecting various systems including the heart and the brain. DDT is moderately toxic to amphibians like frogs and toads and salamanders, with immature amphibians being more sensitive to the effect. Now, this might not sound like a big deal, but I want you to think about what eats bugs. You're using DDT to kill bugs. What eats bugs? Frogs, fish, birds. So you're also killing these animals. You don't want to be killing these animals because they naturally take care of the bugs for you. If you end up accidentally killing them off, all you're going to end up doing is making a resistant bug to your DDT that has no natural predators. This causes biomagnification. Due to DDT's chemical properties, it accumulates in animals. As animals lower on the food chain are eaten by other animals, there's a higher concentration of DDT in their system. This process is known as biomagnification and can lead to primary predators of the food chain receiving the highest dose, which can lead to severe health effects. All right, human health effects. So we eat all of that stuff. DDT tends to accumulate in fatty tissue, but produces no known toxic effects while it's stored in fat. Once DDT has accumulated in the body, it's excreted in urine, feces, and breast milk. Breast milk is often used to measure the population exposure to DDT. All right. The next is the Tuskegee syphilis study. Thank you. All right. So, in 1932, the U.S. Public Health Service, USPHS, began to started a study to record the natural history of syphilis, known as the Tuskegee Study of Untreated Syphilis in Negro Male. The study involved 600 black men, 399 with syphilis, and 201 who did not have the disease. Now, the participants were not informed about the nature of the study. They were told they were being treated for bad blood, a local term used to describe several ailments, including syphilis, anemia, and fatigue. In exchange for participation, the men received free medical exams, free meals, and burial assistance. Looking at this slide, is there anything that stands out to you that makes you say this might be unethical? All right, I'm going to count to 5. Pause it if you need to. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, so it says it right there. The participants were not informed. This is lack of informed consent. The participants should have been told that they were being studied for syphilis, not bad blood. Now the treatment. By 1943, penicillin became the treatment of choice for syphilis and was widely available. However, the participants in the study were not offered this treatment. In 1972, an Associated Press story about the study was published, leading to the end of the study. That is to say, it was still going on. An advisory panel concluded that the study was ethically unjustified as the results were disproportionately meager compared to the known risk to human subjects involved. Now, in this case, there was a class action lawsuit, which was nice, resulting in $10 million in out-of-court settlement in 1974. And in 1997, Bill Clinton, the president at the time, issued a formal apology for the study. So $10 million sounds like a lot, but you got to remember that's distributed between 600 people. So it's really it's less than $20,000 per person, which probably isn't all that helpful considering how much suffering they went through. Now, again, I'm going to count to 5. I want you to think about what here is specifically unethical. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the first is denial of proper treatment. So this is a form of dehumanization. Despite the availability of the effective treatment, the participants were not offered it, which is clear violation of the rights and the disregard for their well-being. The next is they didn't end the study. Even after the ethical issues were known, the study continued until it was exposed by the media, showing a lack of oversight and accountability. Had penicillin not been invented, this would be a different discussion. But with the invention of penicillin, or more accurately, the discovery, the study should have ended.